The world is entering a new energy race. As wars and instability shake global markets, countries are scrambling to protect themselves from growing energy insecurity.
Governments and populations just don't want to have the insecurity and the dependence and the reliance on oil and gas anymore.
Coming up, from billion-dollar investments to geopolitical rivalries and the hidden environmental costs of the green transition, we're in Türkiye's capital to see how wind power is reshaping politics, economies, and even nature itself.
Many people might think that these windmills have been built for tourists, but that's actually not the case.
But as wealthy nations race ahead with the transition, is the rest of the world being left behind?
Something that is notably absent from this conference is Global South representation. All of the panelists, notably geographically, arguably economically, all in the global north, I get a sense that global south countries are being excluded from the conversation. Am I wrong?
Just 2 degrees is on now.
There is no one country, or not even one block of countries, that can do this by themselves.
Every second, enough energy reaches Earth through wind to power human civilizations many times over. Our ancestors relied on it for thousands of years, helping communities to grow long before modern power grids even existed.
But in 2026, wind is more than just a force of nature. It's becoming a strategic resource.
As countries grapple with the climate crisis, with energy insecurity, rising demand, and geopolitical tensions from DRC to Ukraine, Gaza, and Iran, governments are increasingly turning to renewable energy, especially wind, as part of their future energy plans.
Today I'm in Ankara, Türkiye, where energy professionals and policymakers are discussing how wind energy is becoming tied to national security, whether Türkiye can meet its ambitious renewable energy targets, and whether the global transition can truly be fair and inclusive. But before we get into all that, let's begin with how did humanity learn to harness the wind in the first place?
Long before humans generated electricity, they learned to live with the wind.
People depended on the power from their own muscles or from the muscles of animals for doing work. But muscles were not the only source of power. The power of the wind that blew sailing ships across the sea was also put to work to turn windmills, which sometimes operated machinery for grinding grain.
More than 1,000 years ago, some of the earliest known windmills appeared in ancient Persia in what is now Iran. They were built with vertical sails made from reed matting and wood and used to grind grain and pump water in harsh desert environments.
Over time, the technology spread along trade routes into the Middle East, Central Asia, and eventually Europe. By the Middle Ages, windmills have become a defining feature of parts of Netherlands, where they helped drain wetlands and reshape entire landscapes. Netherlands has such an incredible history with wind. It's one of the first countries to utilize the power of wind.
Yes.
What do you think other countries can learn from your experience with this resource?
Well, as you say, we have a tradition, of course, with wind energy. Many people might think that these windmills have been built for tourists, but that's actually not the case. They were innovative at the time that they were built ages ago, and they were used to confront the challenges of at that time.
Meanwhile, how tragic is the plight of Holland is unfolding day by day.
Which had to do with the fact that we were, of course, partially under sea level, and that we had to protect ourselves well against the sea. And with these windmills, we were able also to gain land from the sea. So using wind, using the sea to the fullest with innovative mechanisms, ideas, and that is basically what we are doing right now with wind energy, offshore wind energy as well. So we go way back with that tradition, and we are implementing different techniques, but with the same idea behind it right now.
In many ways, wind power helped lay the foundations for agriculture and trade. But the Industrial Revolution transformed humanity's relationship with energy. Coal, and later oil and gas, offered concentrated power on an unprecedented scale. Fossil fuels became the engine of modern economies, pushing traditional wind technology to the margins. Then came another turning point. In the late 19th century, inventors in Scotland, Denmark, and the US began experimenting with wind-powered electricity generation. What started as small rural turbines eventually evolved into the giant wind farms seen today, some with blades longer than a football field.
But the modern expansion of wind energy has been driven by more than technological innovation alone. The scientists have repeatedly warned that greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuels are warming the planet and intensifying climate risks. At the same time, geopolitical crises, including the US-Israeli targeting of Iran, exposed how dependence on imported energy can leave countries vulnerable. We heard today that wind energy is actually, quote, a great opportunity, even though we're in the face of all these regional and global conflicts. Can you help us understand why?
Well, look, I mean, this latest crisis in the oil and gas world with the Straits of Hormuz is really making people turn towards renewable energy faster than ever. And pretty much every government in Asia and around the world is coming to people like the Global Wind Energy Council asking how can they do more wind energy, more renewables. Because governments and populations just don't want to have the insecurity and the dependence and the reliance on oil and gas anymore. It's too volatile, too political, too militarized. And so people want energy security and they want resilience and independence. And if you want that, you go to renewables. So that's basically what's happening in the world. I think there's no going back from this.
All right, we know wind is everywhere. There's an unlimited supply of it, but surely the infrastructure can be damaged, particularly if you have offshore wind turbines. How is wind safer?
Well, I think the main thing is it's not using constant flows of imported fossil fuels. Whether that's oil or LNG and gas, different types of gas or coal, right? So it's an indigenous resource. Now, of course, you've got infrastructure associated with it, just like you do with anything else. I mean, you're going to have that with thermal power as well, right, and nuclear power. So yeah, you're going to have infrastructure. That infrastructure, in the case of the electricity grid, has many connections between different areas, countries, and so on. And the more diversified the grid is, the less vulnerable it is. But in general, the resource is homegrown, and that's what gives you more security. And the other thing, it's about price, right? People and economies don't want to be subject to these very sharp spikes in fossil fuel prices anymore. And what we've seen is where there are countries where you have abundant renewable energy, the energy prices are lower. We're seeing that in China. We're seeing that in places like Spain, Denmark. Renewables are competitive and they're going to give you lower power prices.
At the moment when energy security, industrial competitiveness, and geopolitical resilience are reshaping global energy priorities, this discussion could not be more timely. Recent developments in the Middle East have once again reminded us how exposed economies remain to fossil fuel price volatility, supply disruption, and geopolitical uncertainty. Energy security can no longer be built on fuels exposed to geopolitical shocks. It must be built on technologies that countries can deploy domestically, competitively at a scale. This reality reinforces a clear priority for government and industry alike to accelerate the transition to reliable, affordable, domestically sourced renewable energy. Wind energy is not only part of the solution, it is becoming one of the pillars of the new energy economy.
One of the pillars. Over the past year, I find the tone has shifted a bit in terms of how we refer to renewable power and how we don't refer to fossil fuel energy. So I get the impression that our future is more of a hybrid nature. Definitively, is that the impression? Is that the reality? Are we not moving completely away from fossil fuels, or do you see a hybrid future for us in the future?
We're definitely moving away from fossil fuels. And if you look at the power system, it's all the new capacity being put on is renewable. Pretty much everything, if you look at the IEA figures from last year. So the new demand, in terms of power and electricity, is renewable. Now, what needs to happen next is decarbonisation of other sectors, right? Because the transport sector is still heavily fossil fuel dependent, right? So we move towards electric vehicles. The heavy transport sector is still dependent on fossil fuels, so you need to move towards more efficient fuels like green ammonia, look at electrification options and so on in the heavy transport. And then you've got industry, which is big production of steel and aluminum and other commodities, which are still fossil dependent, and we need to find ways to electrify them or use green hydrogen. So it's not going to happen. It doesn't happen all at once. It kind of happens by blocks, but electricity was the most important one, and that is going completely renewable already.
So then, do you definitely see a time in our future, maybe a century or two from now, where we will be living our lives completely without fossil fuels?
It won't be a century or two. I'm talking about a couple of decades.
Really?
Yeah, it's happening. And the thing is, when the market reaches a tipping point where the prices are competitive and more competitive than fossil fuels, then it's kind of game over. And we've already seen that with electricity. Nearly all the new electricity now is renewable, just simply because it's the most competitive and the most available. And we're going to see it for other sectors as well. So when you reach a tipping point, for instance, electric vehicles, then that sector is kind of gone for fossil fuels. So no, definitely not a couple of centuries. We're talking about a couple of decades. There will be some uses for fossil fuels. So you've still got some petrochemical and pharmaceutical uses, for instance, and there will be really sectors where it's still vital. But in terms of kind of being the dominant energy source, I think that era is over already. And what's happening now in the Straits of Hormuz is really a kind of pivotal moment, an end of an era moment. And the price signal and the insecurity signal that it's giving, particularly in Asia, is meaning people are now putting in place the policy, which will then mean the transition is completed. And that is what gives us a great hope as well as an industry.
So let's talk about money. Global investment in clean energy is moving at record levels. This year's projections from the International Energy Agency suggest global energy investment could exceed $3 trillion annually, with roughly 2/3 now flowing into cleaner technologies, including renewables and electricity infrastructure. And Türkiye wants a bigger share of that transition. Ankara's 2035 roadmap aims to dramatically expand wind and solar capacity while attracting billions of dollars in foreign investment. But as governments around the world race to secure cleaner and more resilient energy systems, questions remain over whether infrastructure and financing can keep pace with those ambitions?
Why should investors trust wind to invest more in it?
Well, good question. First of all, wind, as I mentioned, has a great potential in Turkey. And I think it's a robust business. I mean, compared to some other technologies like the hydros or like the old ones, including thermal, I think first it's renewable. So it is cheap to produce, maybe I can put it in that way. And the second one, in most of the industrial companies of Turkey, they need some green electricity to continue their production and be eligible for some EU taxonomy, etc. That's also one of the reasons. And when we look at the industry, there are a huge volume of licenses for the wind and solar and the renewables. So I think it's one of the most available licenses in the market. That's also bringing some motivation for the investors to invest in this area instead of some other technologies.
In the past 2 years, we have been observing Turkish wind installations increasing steadily and very rapidly. 2024 was 1.3 gigawatts, 2025 it was around 2 gigawatts, and this year we want the annual installation to grow to around 2.5 gigawatts. And where it is going to be is, in fact, more or less everywhere throughout Turkey. Wherever there is a new wind project under development and will start construction, those projects will start commissioning. And of course, most of our wind projects are on the western and central part and south central part of Turkey. But we have been observing new projects coming online on different spots throughout Turkey. In Avri, in Erzurum, in southeast Turkey, in Van, even in Urfa, etc. So Bingöl, for example, Muş has wind projects now. On provinces where we haven't had wind investments earlier on, now we are going to see wind projects coming online. With these ambitious targets and with this safety zone that Turkey has created inside and around, we have been observing, in fact, this from the financial investors, from private equities, from investment corporations, from Middle East, from Far East, from Europe, that they are looking into understanding opportunities Turkey is providing them, and Turkey will be providing them. So those can come from different sources. I believe Gulf and European companies will be looking more and more seriously to utilize such opportunities in Turkey.
It's time for Life Adjusted, our series exploring how plants and animals are being forced to adapt to a rapidly changing world that's being shaped by us. Renewable energy may be part of the solution to the climate crisis, but the shift to greener power is also transforming nature, sometimes harming ecosystems, sometimes creating new ones.
where do we stand when it comes to the challenges around wind turbines? You need wind for them to move, and the recycling or the disposal of these blades.
Yeah, definitely lots to do still to become truly circular in terms of the wind industry. And you mentioned blades. There's still a lot to do in making sure that all blades are recyclable. The technology is changing, and the big producers are going to new processes that allow for easier shredding or melting of the blades so that they can be recycled. But yeah, plenty to do still. But I would point out that we are, if you look at the UN reports, in terms of the life cycle carbon emissions, we're still the cleanest by far of any industry. So if you take the whole cycle of production and the material and everything, so we are very carbon free.
Many early generation wind turbines and solar panels were designed to last around 20 to 25 years, and large numbers are now reaching the end of their lifespan. China estimates that by 2035, discarded wind turbine blades alone could reach around 3 million tons. In response, some companies are now investing heavily in recycling tech. State-owned energy giant CHN Energy says one of its new facilities will process more than 10,000 tons of discarded wind and solar equipment each year. It's part of a broader push to reuse materials and reduce the environmental impacts of the clean energy transition.
我们国家到2030年，退光伏组件的产生量是150万吨，到2050年将达到2000万吨。对于退役风电叶片的话，2030年大概产生量是120万吨，到2035年是大概能够达到300万吨。
双碳目标实现的过程中，不光以得到绿色电力为终点，在你提供绿色电力的同时，最后能够闭环的解决，才是真正的绿色发展。我们国家能源集团呢，拥有世界最大规模的风电的装机，已经达到了6000万千瓦。同时呢，我们也有5600万千瓦的光伏的装机，这两个加在一块儿，达到了接近1.2亿千瓦。这个数量呢，在全国的比例来说，应该接近了10%了。我们在保证绿色电力供应的同时，同期的考虑所有设备的全生命周期的退役，包括环境治理的影响，都是为了打通这最后1公里。
Something that is notably absent from this conference is Global South representation, noticeably absent.
Yeah.
Are you getting investments from the Global South? Is Türkiye playing a role in investing in the Global South? Is there an exchange of ideas and funding happening?
It is. I mean, the kind of lack of the capability of course, in local and national association, because we are organizing this event within the capabilities that allows us to reach. And whatever we can reach so far, in fact, was the region. Hopefully, in the coming periods, with the support of Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Industry, maybe Presidential Investment and Finance Office, and other government organizations, we will be able to reach out to Global South and show them how we can help and what we can communicate upon.
I saw your panel earlier on diplomacy of wind. All of the panelists, notably geographically, arguably economically, all in the global north. I get a sense that global south countries are being excluded from the conversation. Am I wrong?
No, I mean, as I said, the big challenges of today, whether it's migration, whether it's terrorism, whether it's climate change, can only be confronted together. There is no one country, or not even one block of countries, that can do this by themselves. And climate change, for sure, is one that we need the whole planet for to get into action. And again, hopefully Antalya will lead to concrete results in that respect.
Super, thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador. Pleasure.
As we seek cleaner and more secure ways to power our lives, the race is on to harness the wind. But this transition is about far more than electricity alone. It's changing economies and reshaping global politics, even affecting the natural world. And while many governments see renewable energy as part of the answer to an increasingly uncertain future, the conversations here in Ankara reveal that once again, we are redefining the way we live with energy. But who gets to shape the future and who benefits from it is one of the defining questions of our time.
Somewhere